Hello, everybody, and welcome to Libromancy, a podcast about the magic of books. I'm Josh, and today I'm talking about The Necromancer's House by Christopher Buehlman. So let's believe in the magic of books. I hope I was pronouncing Christopher Buehlman's name right. I think I am, but you never know. So first off, this book, I chose to read this because I'm doing the bingo challenge on Reddit, and one of the squares is horror, and this is classified as a horror, and so I decided to read it, and that's why I am. But I like this book a lot. There are a lot of good things about this book, and there are a couple things that I feel like were just maybe not as good, but they don't bring it down to bad. So first off, let's just talk about a couple things here. Characters I thought were really good. His characters are very believable in this, kind of unbelievable way because they are, magic and we are not. They call themselves luminous if they have the spark. Christopher wrote some really good characters with really good flaws, and he made it very, very believable, and in a non-spoilery way, because I know it's the first chapter, so it's not bad, but he starts our main character in an AA meeting, and he's talking about that, and he deals with that the whole book, his AA, and it's so real. Like, he felt like a real person who just also happens to be able to do magic, and then the way he approaches magic is very relatable and real. Like, oh yeah, I would totally do something like that if I could do magic. Now, there's obviously a couple other things that he's obviously going to do that we aren't going to be thinking about right away for ourselves, right? But the relatability is there. The relationships between these characters is there. There is maybe one or two characters that I would say, yeah, this one's more of a blank slate, but I feel like our main characters, the ones we spend the most time with, are very rounded, and the ones we see less of, the more we see of them, the more rounded they would become. But because we obviously don't see them, we aren't able to spend that time with them. Now, another thing about this book is I looked at the table of contents. I don't generally do that when I'm reading a book. I kind of just skip to the start, but this one has 135 chapters, and it's 410-ish pages, which means it's about 3 pages, mileage may vary there, per chapter, but in reality, there are quite a lot of very, very small chapters that are less than a page on my phone. Now, this is not a bad choice for the way he writes it, because the scenes he writes in those very small chapters are very effective, but sometimes I was like, okay, I don't need a chapter here. This could have just been like a summary break, break in between, put a paragraph space, switch character, put a paragraph space. But that's his choice, and I can't critique that because I am definitely not skilled enough. But there was a lot of that, and I was just like, okay, these are chapters, but sometimes the chapter for me means like, oh, break, you can go do something else. You can stop for a second, and it just kind of, it felt odd to me sometimes. Another thing I noticed is a lot of very small sentences. So 2-word sentence, 2-word sentence, 3-word sentence. And they weren't bad. I'm not trying to make it sound like it's a bad thing of the book that he's done this. It's just something I noticed, and I didn't quite enjoy it so much. Now, maybe I would have enjoyed it if it was a little bit less, or if I'd noticed it less, but I did, so there it is. Now, another thing is that this book falls, I have a hard time trying to figure out how to say this, but not hard, it's crude. There are a lot of crude jokes or sentences or things like that in this book, but there's also surprisingly wholesome scenes where nice things are happening and they're comforting each other and they balance each other out. But the crudeness is not necessarily just being crude for crude's sake. Like, it makes sense every time he's saying it. It's just not what I was expecting at all when I picked up this book. So I can't fault it for being crude more than just I would have preferred it a little less. There were a couple like sexist kind of jokes, but again, he plays them through these characters so well that it's just the way the character is seeing things, and that I don't know what Christopher Buehlman's real attitudes on any of this stuff are, but I have to just imagine that it's not exactly what his characters are putting out, right? So it's just a weird mix of crude and not crude. You'll go a bunch of pages and then it'll be like, oh, crude, and then a bunch of not, and then a little bit of crude, and then a wholesome. So it is what it is. Now, I feel like we're just going to have to get into the spoiler section here because there is so much to talk about with this book. If you haven't read it yet, I do recommend it. It was pretty quick for me and a lot of fun. So let's talk about our characters first. Our main character here, Andrew Ranulph Blankenship. And I love that he goes by that the whole time, that he introduces himself with his full name more often than just, by Andrew. But then a lot of people know him, and he is our main character. He's just a guy. He is a magic user. He's training, or kind of starting to train, this girl named Annika, and he kind of wants to have a relationship with her, a more relationship, a romantic one. She's not. kind of interested in that. But Andrew is kind of interesting. You could tell he's got this kind of paranoid mindset because he talks or he thinks about his defenses that he's built up around his house, and he is our necromancer. It's his house. And for a book about necromancy, there was surprisingly little, and it's not even the necromancy that you're thinking of, because Andrew's magic specialty is film necromancy and cars. So let me explain what that means. Film necromancy, he can kind of like interrupt people in a film, VHS, and get them to kind of break and talk to you so they can, you can interrogate them and talk to them and they'll answer your questions. Sometimes they freak out if you don't do it at the right spot, and he calls it letting the trapdoor open. It's very unique and interesting when he says that, because you could just tell it's like, chick, and then they're in, and he's got the person he's talking to him. And like one of the wholesome things in this book is that he uses his necromancy to create an AA sponsor for himself. I don't remember the name of the guy who is his sponsor, but it's this guy on TV who is a big proponent of AA, and he talks to him and he's just like, hey, you're still willing to be my sponsor? And the guy remembers it over and over, throughout the time, because he uses the same tape. And I was like, this is so wholesome. Like this guy who you've kind of brought back is totally like chill with you doing that and being like, hey, I'm here to help you. Let's get through this together. It's just so nice, And then his other thing is cars. He can make a car run on water. He makes a car so it can, it's unnoticeable, no parking tickets, no speeding tickets. And then I love this one. He's like, and he made it so if you believe it'll fit in a spot, it'll fit in the spot. And if you don't believe, then it won't. That's a huge thing in this book, is that the magic is about 50% belief or more. If you believe it'll happen, it'll happen. If you don't believe, then it's not going to happen as well or as effectively, or it'll cost more power that you don't have, right? So Andrew's our main character. He is training Annika, and we're going to get to kind of what happens next. Our next main character is Annika. She is, obviously Andrew's friend. She is learning to be an adept or a luminous, and she turns out to be a big stone luminous, which means she's really good at carving or using groundwork, and you could think of her as like an earthbender, basically, right? Really cool like that. Then we have, this is real deep spoiler territory, but we have Ichabod. Ichabod is an interesting thing. We don't know who he is, we don't know what he is, but like those scenes where he is in, I'm like, you feel the way that Christopher Buehlman puts them against each other, puts Andrew and Ichabod against each other. I was starting to be like, oh yeah, like I totally feel for Ichabod. Andrew, just like lighten up and relax, like, but then I'm like, wait a minute. Isn't Ichabod like controlling like all these people in this building, and he's willing to kill them all just because? And I'm like, I need to rethink this. Like he totally suckered me into like falling for Ichabod as just like, oh, he's sympathetic. And it's like, yeah, maybe he's sympathetic, but like we really don't know, because we don't know anything about him. Not even Andrew knows anything about him, and he's the one who brought him back. So we're gonna talk more about Ichabod a little bit later, I think, though. Haint was an interesting one. He's a user, a magic user, luminous or user. Sorry, I'm probably gonna switch between because the book kind of does. He is really good at killing, and he's pretty crude, if I remember right. He likes to just kill people and strut his power around. So he was an interesting one. I have to say, though, because we're not going to talk about Haint again after this, he's all about death, right? He loves killing any artifact or magic spell he can get about killing. He wants it. But to die by throwing up snakes, that is the worst. Like, he gets cursed by our next character we're going to talk about, Baba Yagi, right? And he just starts throwing up snakes, but of course non-poisonous ones, and small enough that he's not going to die from it, but it cracks his larynx. He can't talk, he can't do anything, and he just like continuously coughs up a snake, 30 seconds reset, cough up another snake. And I'm just like, whoa, please. That is a horrifying image, and I just don't want that anywhere in my brain. But now it's in your brain if you hadn't read the book already, so I hope you enjoy that. Now we're going to talk about Baba Yaga, the big bad of this book, because we're going to skip ahead a little bit. We have Nadia. Nadia is a Rusalka, which is basically just a Russian mermaid, but they like to kill you. So they kiss you, they have sex with you, they kill you, they drag you underwater. And this Rusalka, Nadia, kills Baba Yaga's son. Now, nobody, of course, they didn't know he was Baba Yaga's son. I'm not sure he even knew how Baba Yaga's son he was, but nonetheless, Baba Yaga doesn't take too kindly to that. So she starts, and she's coming to bring in this war against Andrew. And I know we're talking, this is a mix of plot and character, but she is less of a character because we don't see too much about her. We just see the fear, and we feel the fear palpably from everybody who kind of comes into contact with her, of how afraid they are, how afraid Andrew is of her. And so she she's this big presence, but we never really see what more there is to her until the very end, which was just hilarious. They've been fighting this big duke out fight back and forth with magical blows. I mean, not like a punch and fight, of course, but you'll get there when you get there. It's really good. But she has been dispossessed and she's trying to take over a body and she can't do it. So she goes to the house over and she's like, oh crap, I'm going to get, there's this, I don't even know what to call it. I don't remember what the book calls it, but it's basically an entity that destroys ghosts or, collects them and forces them into the beyond or just destroys them. And she's like, I'm not ready to go to the beyond. I don't want it. I'm never going there. And so she tries to possess a dog, but the dog's too fast and runs around and she can't get it. And so she ends up possessing a pregnant skunk at the last second. And you don't know, did she make it out? Did she not? She even comments before when she's taken over the dog, like, how long am I going to have to spend as a dog before I remember, who I am and how to do stuff and to switch into a real body. So like, who knows? But I love that it was just left just ever so slightly open and it's just nice. We have Michael Rudnick. He's the stone teacher. He's the one who teaches Annika a lot. He's a pretty fun dude. He comes in to help Andrew at the not the very end, but the end of the book and just be like, hey, I'm here to help you against Baba Yaga because, she's an unspeakable evil and just kills a lot of people. And we're trying to stop that. Yeah, so the plot basically is, though, Baba Yaga's son gets killed. She comes back for revenge. Turns out she's a body switcher and she switched bodies with her, not switched bodies, but she killed her daughter's soul and took her daughter's body so that she could continue living on. And she's bringing a war against Andrew to get back all of the Russian books that he stole. And we have this nice back history that we get slowly throughout the whole book where he's like, I don't want to talk about this, but like, here's what happened. And he kind of like tells us a little bit about it. You can get these hints and that they had a history. So let's just talk about some of the really cool magic in there, which he turns his car Buttercup into a minotaur with Michael Rudnick, and it's an amazing scene. It goes after the house with the chicken legs. Oh, just sweet. And I love that he's decked out his bathroom. So he has an inexhaustible toilet paper roll. As long as you believe it has toilet paper, it's got toilet paper. And if you fall down into the tub head first, hard enough to crack your skull and kill yourself, you can go anywhere you can kind of remember and talk about and think about. So, and then you can get back the same way. So he's just like, oh man, this is like interesting stuff. And I loved that foreshadowing the whole time. He's like, oh, every time somebody comes into his house, he's always like, okay, make sure you leave, here, go out the same door you came in. Go out the same door you came in. And to the very end, I was like, okay, he's been saying this the whole time. It's gotta come through. And it does. And it was just like, oh, how do you kill an unkillable guy? You shrink him to smaller than an ant and let a farm of ants just eat him and kill him. And it was, that might sound gross, but it was nice, and it wasn't actually that gross. And then we're talking about Ichabod here. We find out that he's some sort of like higher being almost, and Michael summoned him to save his wife, but he'd actually summoned him the time before when she died, when he was drunk driving and he got her killed. And then the entity was able to give her another year and a day basically until she had to die, and can't send him back. And he's always giving him these commands, and he's like, oh, I had a goal and I couldn't kill this person, or this person A summoned me and told me to kill person B, but person B told me, commanded me with the same kind of thing that I couldn't hurt them. So he's like, so you basically see that he's done all of this since the past. Like, he was there and then he went away and now he's back, and he set this all up for to kill the Baba Yaga. So just a little bit creepy and spooky, and we're like, what is he? Who is he? But I have to say, there was a lot of good foreshadowing. There was a lot of good plot, and the atmosphere, just the feeling of the horror and the magic was just like, all the magic was creepy, but like the way he has to set up all of his spells when he's going through it, and you can just kind of feel the way it feels in the air. And then the horror thing he feels were like very vivid and good without being shocking, because I feel like, in my mind at least, a lot of horror gets conflated with jump scare / freak out, like but horror can be a lot more subtle, and I feel like this is more of this subtle horror where if you're not feeling it, you're not seeing it right away, and then like, oh my gosh, this is horror, and like, oh, it's right there in your face. So let's see. Again, I really enjoyed this book, and I felt like the characters did good. The logic was there. I didn't feel like any of the characters were like, oh yeah, let's just do this all of a sudden. That didn't fit. And again, I forgot to mention this, when Michael Rudnick pulls a meteor out of the sky to try and kill Baba Yaga. That was pretty sweet. So I think that's going to be everything I have to talk about The Necromancer's House by Christopher Buehlman. I really enjoyed it. It was a nice creeping horror without being kind of jump scary or over the top and ridiculous. Well formed characters, a great atmosphere, and good writing jobs. I mean, I could tell that he was very deliberate in all of his writing. Whether or not it works for me is, the story, but that's how it goes. So that's going to wrap up my discussion. Thanks everybody for listening, and thanks to David Hillowitz for the intro and outro music. Of course, if you have any questions or comments, please send those to libromancypod@gmail.com. Please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from, and remember to believe in the magic of books.